Hello sweet friend, my name is Maike, and in this video I would like to decorate a journal page with you with some inky florals. We have done something similar in the past, but I've been playing around with diluting the inks with water and using different values of the ink for some of these floral elements. This is highly inspired by the things that Simone has been doing throughout her opening her ink advent calendars in the month of December. And through her, I realized that sometimes certain inks just really have a lot of colors going on that you might not really notice when you're just using them straight up. But then they reveal all this amazingness when you dilute them. And so I was really eager to go into my ink drawer and pick some out and see what I can see. And so yeah, these two are some of the examples. I think my favorite so far has been this cutie here, which is Inkabara Earth. And this is not only stunning in a pen, some of this chroma shading comes through in a pen as well, but look at all the colors in here. And of course, while making this, I smudged it, because what else could happen when you like something that you're creating? You're gonna smudge it. But there's green, there's pink, there's brown. It's so beautiful. It's so earthy, and it looks like pottery. I love it. Yeah, and this is with a lot more water, and it turns so soft, like a really soft green there. And then here, this big leaf right here, I went over it twice so you can layer the diluted ink as well. Now granted, this was the full strength ink just with the dip pen, and so these two are starting to look very similar, so I don't know how effective that is, or how much of a different effect it gives you than just your dip pen. But yeah, so fun. And then I also tried a lot with the Sailor Ink Studio 273 ink. And this is one of the inks that I like the base color, but I think it is much more interesting once you dilute it. It brings out this really bright purple and yellow. It's stunning. So fun. Here these lines within the leaf for this flower are done with a negative painting technique that I learned through watercolor classes. So you just paint around the shape, so you can layer the ink but leave, if you've already put color on the paper, it's gonna show through, and so you can play around with that. So fun. Yeah, and some of this I should have waited a little bit longer for the ink to dry, so some of the lines that I added up top ended up feathering because the ink underneath wasn't dry enough yet. For example, here, those lines, they did feather, but I think you could avoid that. But yeah, really fun. I think this one is very successful. I quite like that one and this one. Again, playing around with having different elements be of different value. So yeah, that's the basic idea of these florals, and using inks in different strengths, whether that's right out of the sample or right out of the bottle versus diluting it with water, and then the diluted ink, even layering those to get different strengths. And so these were the examples that I wanted to show you, but the actual page I wanted to work on with you is here in my little journal. And I wrote out a text. This is copy text from a newsletter that I really liked. We can talk more about that while we play around with the ink. And let me see if I can show you, give you a sense of what we're dealing with here. I penciled this in. There's a big flower right here, some leaves, 2 birds, and then down here we have a couple more flowers, and then this one I have overlapping the other page. Sometimes that's quite nice, so things don't feel so stark between 2 pages. Sometimes I like having just a little bit of overlap there. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do, and I'm going to use my Kakimori dip nib for lines and for extra dark ink, but then mostly I'm going to use my Sailor Hokuro dip nib in the brush, but I mean, you could use any brush. I think the nice thing about this one is that the bristles are relatively short. I feel like sometimes that gives you more control if you're working in smaller areas like this. And then also this being entirely plastic also means that it's very easy to wash out. And in general, if you're not, you know, working with ink that you've already taken out of the bottle, I think having a separate brush that is entirely for ink can help you be more mindful of what, if you're just dipping it into the ink bottle, you might end up contaminating your ink. If you use more painterly brushes, because they have more bristles and potentially have natural hair, and that's just harder to clean out. Or you could introduce like watercolor particles, I guess, or paint particles into your bottle. So, but for these kind of things, I quite like this. This works well for me. And then I just have this little paint palette, and then this is the Inkabara Earth that I've already diluted with water. And I found that I can be pretty generous with the dilution in terms of the ratio between ink and water. Very little ink with quite a bit of water goes a long way, because I like to, again, play around with layering or putting other lines on top of it. So yeah. But I guess also that would depend on how dark your ink is to begin with. Okay, so that's all that. And I think, yeah, let's zoom you in a little bit. Look at that. I twisted in the right direction right from the get-go. And yeah, I guess you can't quite see the pencil lines, but hopefully it's gonna be fun nonetheless to see just the ink do its thing. And the way I approach it is to just, well, I guess you just make one decision based on the value scheme, and then you just base the other things around it. So with this big flower, for example, I definitely want the petals to be a somewhat lighter value because I want to add lines to them, and then it could be fun to make the center a little bit darker. So we're just gonna start with that. And something, and is this fun? A good, yeah, zoom? I think so. Something that I have noticed is that inks, at least on the, this is Midori paper, dry pretty quickly. So if you're doing something where, for example, you outline your shape entirely and then you fill in, sometimes you end up with lines, like you can see where you first outlined the shape, because the ink is already drying. So either you have to work really quickly, or something that I've started to try and, I guess, teach myself is to not do that, not create a outline and have ink in an area that it's gonna take me a long time to get to fill in, if that makes sense. So yeah, but that's all also personal preference. Like, do you mind if there's a line or not? Or what paper are you using? This could also be really fun and beautiful on watercolor paper. I would imagine that looks really pretty. I guess I could have prepared an example, but I mean, look at that ink. Isn't that so beautiful? I think it's really magical. All the different shades. And you get all of that for free, technically, in terms of, you know, the variety of colors within the shape. I mean, you could create that with watercolor, but you would have to put the colors in there. And then, so I'm gonna do this dark, and I might just put the dots in later with the kakimori. Now here I sketched into leaves, and I think I will want the leaves darker than the petals. But I think, yeah, let's do the layering that I was talking about. So we're just gonna do this layer, and so right now it's gonna be the same value as the petals, but once we put another layer over top, it's gonna be darker. And that's also something that, yeah, you would do in watercolor. Yeah, something that I've recently come to kind of start to realize or understand is why the fascination with ink. And I think some of this is a good clue in the sense that I just love color and I love texture, and ink turns that into a very surprising process where I can pick the general color so that it's a color that I like, but then the ink will surprise me with what else is going to happen. And that's similar to watercolor too. If you let watercolor do its thing, then it can surprise you, and it goes beyond what you put down and your skill and what you control. But with ink, it's so fun because I mean, here I'm putting down very big areas, of course, of color. But when I often draw with it too, and I just love drawing so much. I'm not really a painter. I'm somebody who draws. And so there I get the benefit of colors and the surprise of colors, but while drawing, because the lines all look different and where is the ink gonna pool and shade, and yeah, so I think it just brings an element of discovery and exploration into it that I don't have to put there, right? It's just gonna happen by itself. I mean, goodness gracious, that looks so pretty. I can only mess it up from here. And then, so there is a little stem that has like an S curve down here. I think I'm gonna do that with the kakimori nib. And so, yeah, maybe these leaves we're also gonna do in this lighter shade, and then we'll see if we're gonna layer over top of it or not to make them darker. Yeah, so if you're somebody who likes inks, do you know why you like inks? I mean, it's also fun to just enjoy them, and you don't have to turn this into like a soul-searching thing or anything. But yeah, I'd be very curious to know how much of it you're aware of what exactly it is you're responding to there. But yeah, I think for me it's definitely the discovery and the surprise of it all, and being able to have color surprises while drawing. Like, that doesn't really happen, right? You typically draw with, a pencil, and the pencil is always going to have its gray color. Or you're going to draw with a black line, like a fine liner or something. And, this down here, I think you can somewhat tell maybe. There's a flower, and it has this almost like a star shape in the middle. I think this would be another fun thing where we could try or where I can show you the negative painting that I was talking about. And so I'm going to fill the whole thing in, and then later on we're going to carve out the star. I think that'll be good. So this Inkabara ink, oh yeah, and see, I was going to save the star there, but I'm going to just fill it in. This is sold out everywhere as a bottle. I got this sample from Van Ness, and yeah, I can't find a bottle anywhere. Well, I did find one store in the UK who seems to still have it in stock, but I mean, I love it very much, but do I love it $20 shipping on top of the price of the bottle? I'm not sure. Maybe. So, yeah. And that's gonna There's the threads of the binding. And so now the thread is just gonna look really dark, probably. Where I colored it with the ink, it's not just ink pooling, it's just the way that the thread is picking up the color. Oh well, it's gonna be okay. What else here? We're gonna color in, these are some, I don't know, some berries or something, and they have like a spiky crown. In German, I think this is called Hagebutte, or that's what this reminds me of. Not that this needs to be anything real. It's just a fun thing, just like berries. Sometimes it's nice to combine flowers with just other things, especially if it has a completely different shape to it. So it's kind of fun. Yeah. And then this one is a basic circle, but it'll have some lines over top. So I think I'm just gonna do some value where the lines are gonna be and then leave the center out. I think that's gonna be nice. I think I'm so in love with how this ink looks like when it's diluted that I want to just put the diluted ink everywhere. But I do want to show you and also play around with all the other ways we can combine that with lines and with darks and lights and things like that. And then I think I'm gonna make the stem the same. And these leaves, they're gonna be darker, but we're gonna layer 2 layers over top. Just like that. And you can have a little bit of control over certain texture aspects or the way ink pools. So, well, maybe I can bring you in closer. So water, I guess, wants to stay together. Like water molecules want to stay together. So when you lift up your dip pen or your brush, that is where you're gonna release a lot of water, and therefore that's where the ink is gonna pool a lot, and you're gonna introduce a lot more pigment, but also, or dye, I guess, but also more water, and so it's gonna increase the texture. So sometimes it can be fun to just, well, you're gonna have to have a wet surface for that. This is already dry, but you can just dab, 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 dab if you want to make it darker. I learned this on a video the other day. I'll link that below, where Pikarar, she had a friend of hers do the voiceover to her drawing with inks, and the friend is a chemist, if I'm not mistaken. And so the friend was explaining certain things about ink. So I'll leave that link below if you're interested. Yeah. Okay, cute. And then we're gonna do the spikies really dark. And then I also have this flower right here, which is sort of a very delicate one. There's gonna be a lot of lines, but let's see if we can do these little dots here. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, that works just fine. And these smaller little shapes are really sometimes a little tricky to do with the kakimori nib. I am actually wondering if I should get myself a glass dip pen if I want to create more of these smaller lines. Let me know if you have a glass nib, because I feel like there's a lot of differences in how scratchy or comfortable glass nibs are and what price you're willing to pay for it. Me being a little bit clumsy sometimes, I am also concerned about breaking it, and so I wouldn't want to get something crazy expensive, but I also don't like scratchy. So let's zoom you back out so we can see what we can see so far. That's what it's looking like. A little, I mean, beautiful texture and color, but a little basic in the sense that it's just the one value and no lines or anything. So what do we feel like? I think we can work with that up here. And then I guess I zoomed you out a little too far. Hope you're not seasick. And so let's go ahead and get started on this dark stuff. And something also that I've noticed with the brass nib, if you're laying down a lot of ink or darker ink areas like this, sometimes once the ink is dry, you can see almost like scratch marks because the brass nib kind of like scratched into the paper and into the paint. So I've been trying to teach myself to have a light hand when putting down large parts of ink, and see how if the paper is still wet and you just dip, you're gonna deposit every pat will deposit a lot of ink, and then you can make it even darker. I hope that makes sense. Let's see how we're doing with those lines, if we can do lines already without them feathering. Maybe I'll just go, yeah, I think we're good. Yeah. So rather than going around the entire shape here, I think I'm just going to indicate where the in-between of the petals is. And I'm going to add the decorative lines over top. Sometimes I think if you have a solid shape like that, and one that is so interesting at that because of all the texture, there's no need to like go around all of it. You know what I mean? If the shape can stand on its own, is basically. Oh, and another thing about this thing that I realized about where you stop to lift off the pen, and therefore where you're depositing more ink, you can use that in order to show depth. So what I mean by that is, if you imagine this petal curving inward into the center, then technically this would probably be a little bit darker. And so the line, right, I can draw this from the center going outward, or I can draw this line starting here and going inward. And though this might feel a little bit counterintuitive, this is though where you will draw the line, and because you're stopping there, you're gonna deposit more ink, and therefore once this line dries, it'll have the darkest spot where naturally there would be less light. And here I accidentally did it the other way. I hope that makes sense. So if that is something you want to use to your advantage, if that is like an effect that you're after, so we can do this with all of these surface lines that I want to add. I'll just make all of them going from outward to inward, and hopefully once this dries you will see what I mean. But I think, yeah, I think you can already tell how now this part of the lines is going to be darker. Oh, and I smudged it there. Of course I did. But that is, you know, that just comes with working with paints and inks, and it's just we're gonna put that under the umbrella of natural texture is fun. Yeah, see? I love this. Maybe I should just get some more samples of this ink. I mean, samples will last you a while, won't it? Yeah, I'm not sure if this is just a very popular color, or if Imkabara doesn't make this color anymore, that it's sold out everywhere. And also not every store is apparently selling Imkabara inks, but the ones that I did find were all out. yeah, so how are you doing? How is journaling? How's your creativity? Like I said, I've just been trying to find at least a little moment to just play around with stuff and just watch the ink dry and see what effects it's gonna create. It really is so soothing. I also ordered some speedball bee nibs, and if you're unfamiliar, those are dip nibs as well. They just have a really flat surface. It's almost like drawing or writing with a ellipse or like a circle, and so you get these really broad lines. I'm very excited to see, not only for writing, but I thought maybe it's kind of fun to draw with. I don't know, it seems like sometimes those dip nibs you have to hold at a very specific angle, and usually that specific angle means you're gonna hold it like the pen is gonna be very vertical. So I don't know how weird that is. So we'll see. If I like that. And of course I'm gonna share it with you. And then, yeah, let's fill that in dark all the way. And by the way, for these dark areas, you could also use the brush. You wouldn't necessarily need to have a dip nib like this. You would just go in to your full strength ink. But why not? And then you can also sometimes push the ink around a little bit to where you want it. Yeah. We'll see how this dries. And then this, I wanted to show you, again, it might not be super different than just going in with the full strength ink anyway, but just for the heck of it, let's do the layering here. Like that. And I guess I could have shown you, you could have left a line there. Maybe we can do that somewhere else. I guess I could also point out that I found that with these like floral elements to frame a journal page, I like these kinds of things where it's not going, I mean, I've done that before too, and I guess I should zoom you out to explain this. Of course, it can be fun to frame the whole thing, but sometimes it's really hard to then fit your writing into it. So these like corner elements that kind of work as brackets are nice, especially if they're on opposite sides, because then you can still fit quite a bit of writing in there. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful. And I'm not quite sure yet what to do with the birds, so let's just, for efficiency's sake, do some more of these flowers. And this is also where I wanted to show you the negative painting technique. And I just realized, since we tried the layering the diluted ink on top of each other up there, why don't we try the layering, but we're layering the just straight up ink over top of the diluted, just because. Let's see how, if that's any different. And so I'm just going over the petals and that star shape that I had sketched in for myself. I'm just gonna leave uncovered, and so we're basically just carving it out, and I think that's gonna look fun. At least I hope it will. But I think it will. No, don't push the, now there's more than one ink container on the desk, and I keep pushing things around. So far I've been pretty lucky with not having too many crazy ink accidents or incidents, which is surprising because yeah, I can be a little bit clumsy, but I guess now I'm saying that and watch me have something happen while we're doing this video. Yeah. And of course, the Midori paper is taking this like a champ. Yeah. What else could we talk about? Anything else fun to share? I'm not sure. It's cold here now. I think I was in one of my other videos I was talking about how warm the winter has been so far, but that seems to be changing. It's already so much colder. Well, that's a lot of ink. And here again, like I could try and see if I can push the ink towards the center because that's where naturally it would be a little darker. But again, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. It's just something to note. Yeah, see? Star. Now you're drawing by drawing the shape around it. Cool. And let's add some lines to that. And again, this might be, we'll see how the Kakimori nib does with this. And again, I'm gonna go towards the center so that all the darker part of the line is gonna converge, although that might create, yeah. So I guess with something like this where you have a lot of lines converging, you end up creating such a big blob of ink. And there I smudged it a little bit with the Kakimori nib. Again, this Kakimori nib, it's so great because it holds so much ink, and so you don't have to re-dip all the time, or you can, yeah, create something that's really dark, but also you have less control. And if you have things that are so fine, you don't actually want to deposit that much ink. Oh, and that might be a mistake. Hold on. I wanted to use the brush to pick up some of the liquid, but that is not the right brush for a job like that. Okay, I think we've disaster averted. Yeah, so I think this might not be the right tool for such fine things. I guess I still also have the Hokuro sailor nib. I tend to not use that for drawing. I'm not sure why. And here we're just gonna add some lines, I think. I guess you could also dip your dip nib into the diluted ink. You wouldn't have to go full strength, but yeah, I think I like the contrast. So, oh yeah, I wanted to tell you what this text was about. So it's from the quote is from Ingrid Fattel Lee, who wrote a book called Joyful, and I've been, ever since reading her book, I am on her mailing list, and so she, writes about joy. And this one was about her finally having bought a guitar for herself, and she realized that she's been putting off buying a guitar for so long because there's always something more urgent. And then she had to come to realize that if it's never a good time to buy a guitar, then you have two choices. Either you just admit that to yourself and so you don't buy the guitar, or you buy the guitar regardless and make room for that joy. And she has found that all of a sudden, once she did have the guitar, she had time for the guitar too, because it was in her possession. And so everything, she, you know, maybe she spent less time on her phone or less time watching a movie. And I guess she was sharing that as a reminder that so many other things have urgency to them. We get reminders for them, we get push notifications, we have people checking in on status of the work that we're doing, but joy doesn't have that, and so it is easy to push joy aside. So I thought that was a really good point. And so I thought I'd copy that into my journal. And I quite like that it's now on the page opposite of where I have where I have printed out and collected my some of the sewing patterns that I might want to try out this year. I mean, this is pretty complex there with the shirts, so I'm not sure if I can make that happen, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I can make this happen, and then maybe with some help I can have a skirt by the end of the year. And this, by the way, is also ink, diluted ink, and then mixing different ink colors. And I don't know if I can flip it, but I had some ink left over, and I put some, this might be a bad idea, put some here to use as a border. I thought this turned out really fun as well. So I have that ready for whenever I want to journal. Okay, well, looking at the time, I think I am gonna put in those other details of camera, and then I'll gonna come back and show you the end result. All right, it's not quite dry yet, but I did add all the details that I want to add, at least for now. Yeah, the birds have eyes now, yay! And I added another layer to these leaves to make them even darker, and left a line in the middle, painted around that, added some dots here in the middle, and then some lines down here, I think. Yeah. So there's that, and unfortunately, yeah, this interfered with the thread interfered here, but it's fine. I mean, you know, it is a journal and not something that, you know, you hang on a wall, so. And then, oh, if you're curious, this writing is written with Teranishi Opera Rose. I think that looks really nice together, huh? The Inkabara Earth with the Opera Rose. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's making me happy. I think this decoration and playing with these textures and colors definitely fits what the text is about. I now have ink on my fingers. You know, that's how it's supposed to be. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed seeing this. Maybe you're making your own flowers. And again, shout out to Simone. I'll have her linked below. And yeah, let me know if you're interested in more inky drawing videos like this. I'm definitely excited to explore this more and what else we can do with this. And this really just goes to show a journal page can be really simple, and yes, of course, you can make it even simpler and just write, but in terms of, you know, decorations, all you need maybe is a fun color and some water and a brush, and yeah, it can feel very decorated with just that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing this time with me, keeping me company, and until next time. Happy journaling!